Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the UK Brand Show. Hello, Penny.
Hello, Mark. How are you? Good to see you back in the country.
Yes, I've been to New York. I've been to my association's annual news media conference, which guess what the hot topic was all about? AI.
It's a common subject at the moment, isn't it?
It certainly is. And some interesting and scary in equal measures developments, I'm sure, in that space.
But, so any one thing you took away from the conference on AI?
Well, it's about, it comes down to what's been said as three things, I guess. I mean, where's the regulation going to come in?
Yeah.
Firstly, and as part of that, we've got things like the American elections coming up. We have the Ukrainian war going on. Where's AI going to shift the focus and concentration around those things with fake news and all the rest of it? And that's a worry for the news industry. And thirdly, what's it mean for people's jobs? So there's a obviously it's going to take over in many ways, and going to be a big focus for news media, for example, but for all of us. But we'll have to wait and see. It's all very early days, yeah.
The only thing guaranteed is change.
Yeah. The only thing that stay the same is to say the fact we're going to be getting a period of change again, yeah. So, but anyway, we're not here to talk about AI specifically today. We may get onto it, but we are here because everyone can see we have a special guest. Who do we have, Pen?
We have indeed. We have Julia Phillips from the Potting Shed Events, who's had a really interesting career. So we're going to talk through how she got to where she is today, but also then just exploring how events are fitting into people's strategic direction at the moment. So welcome, Julia.
Hello, Julia.
And I'm fairly sure AI will crop up as well.
I'm sure it will. I was saying, as I was saying, I thought, I'm sure we're going to come onto it.
Yeah, every facet of life right now.
But you know what? It's funny because I was talking about, Julia, I was talking about New York and the media conference I come from. So we had about 500 people from 50 countries all converging on New York for the latest trends in news media, etc. And as I say, it was very AI dominated. But also, just putting that aside for 1 second, one thing which is relevant to you, I guess, is, so I run an advertising initiative, like the future of advertising sort of thing. And we had a workshop there. And one of the big focuses in advertising was how to, for example, news media diversify its revenue streams in the future. So, we can't necessarily rely on traditional advertising as such anymore. We have to be more creative and more dynamic, and look at other options and stuff, and other revenue streams. And one of the big things that's coming out now is lots of news media companies are going into the event space because they see it as like a very lucrative area to be involved in. So it's really good that we've got you on the show today, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So should we start, Julia? Just sort of give us a brief overview of your. You've had a really interesting career, and
checkered, I think is the word.
Checkered, yes. Different continents and different types of business. So yeah, tell us the sort of your journey so far.
Sure, I'll keep it as brief as I can, although I've been doing it for 30 years, so stop me if I'm going on too long.
Okay.
So I suppose I joined the events industry before it was really a recognised industry. So it was in the kind of early 90s. It was very much, I don't know, you probably remember back to, team building was all about walking on hot coals and putting people on it in extreme conditions. And I started working at a team activity provider in Hertfordshire, and quickly realised that actually this was a fantastic career opportunity, I felt, because it was engaging with people, it was going from different project to different project. And I was there for, I suppose, 13 years. I was their youngest ever female event manager. And that company, because it was right at the start of the industry as we now know it, they evolved quite quickly into offering conferences and incentives and so forth. So being at the start of a journey like that, I was able to work across a lot of different areas within the business, which gave me a hugely amazing broad scope. And in fact, it was a very good training ground. So lots of the people that I worked with there are now scattered in the industry in all sorts of different areas and nooks and crannies. We've grown up a lot since then. We've grown up, we are now a very recognised industry. We're a very large industry. We are a reasonably lucrative industry, to your point, Mark, as well. Recent events notwithstanding. And I worked for all sorts of different event agencies, both here and overseas, as you referenced, until 2011. In 2011, the world went a little bit wobbly. And I'm interested, Mark, that you were in advertising, because my dad was in advertising, and he always said to me, the first two things to be cut in a recession is advertising and events, because we are seen to be superfluous to requirement. So in 2011, I was made redundant, unfortunately, and I had a 3-month-old child at the time, and I had no idea what I was going to do. So I started freelancing, which quickly evolved into an agency in its own right. And I took on some team members, and we grew very quickly because there was a real need in the industry at that time for people who had long-term experience. Coming off the back of a recession, I think people tend to do well if they have got a huge amount of experience and also a huge amount of energy. A lot of people after the pandemic have seemed to exit the business. And I think it's because they just don't have the stomach to start afresh again. So we did really, really well from 2011 to 2015, where we merged with another agency, which I became MD of. And I actually exited that agency in 2019, albeit that I worked until, unfortunately, the pandemic hit. And then I left at that point. And I set up Potting Shed Events in 2021, middle of 2021, just as the sort of bubble of events was beginning to come back to life. And it's been a very interesting journey since then, in terms of what we're seeing clients ask for, what we're seeing the industry, how we're seeing the industry react. We have a number of challenges around employment, staffing, training. We have huge challenges in terms of bedroom stock, venue availability. It's all crazy. Lots of people last year had their best ever year because everyone was so desperate to get back together face to face. So we're now sort of settling out, I feel, into a little bit of a straighter, flatter road, and we can begin to have a look into the future. We just haven't had time to even consider what
Julia, when you were developing your business, I read somewhere that you generated it into literally a multi-million-pound business very quickly. What was behind all of that? What was the reason for the success?
We are still to this day, even in this new guise, we are incredibly strong at client retention, and we just, I shudder to say it was pure luck. I think there's a lot of hard work involved.
I'm sure it's not just luck.
But no. But we did happen to have a number of clients who grew very quickly that we were working with, and so our growth sort of mirrored that, I suppose, their growth as well. And that was a little bit luck of the draw, in the sense that we could equally have had clients who were stagnating or going out of business. We also had I think we have a really strong ethic. We're going to talk about AI in a little bit, I'm sure, but for me, the power of events is the live connection. And I know that virtual events are a big piece of the business, and they're a big piece of our industry now, and I don't see that going away. But actually the connections that people made, you made the point, Mark, that you've just come back from New York. 500 people came from all over the world to be in that space together. And no matter our fear when we started on virtual events and virtual conferences, and Zoom was a big thing, and all the events industry was going to die because we had all this technology now. And yet there is no replacement for getting people into a room, talking to each other, networking, idea generation, collaboration. All of those things happen much better because we as a race haven't evolved yet to be able to do that online as fast as the technology has evolved.
Well, you could see that people just welcome the fact it was our first big conference back since the pandemic. So we didn't know how many people would turn up, if they would turn up at all, but they did. And, you know, you could sense this almost relief in people that they could now talk to people face. That's not to say that the Zoom meetings, all the rest of it will go away. No. I think it's going to be a bit of a hybrid business of
well, we're doing this on Zoom now because it's much easier than all of us trying to find us, you know, a time in our diaries when we can all meet. And absolutely, we run a lot of project meetings now on Zoom, where historically we would have gone into client offices or they would have come to us. It's got its place for sure. But as you say, that need to get into a space together. In fact, the first two events we ran after the pandemic, we struggled to get people to sit for dinner because they were so busy talking over pre-dinner drinks. They just wouldn't sit down. Please go and sit down. And they'd literally walk past someone, like, oh, I haven't seen you for ages. So it's lovely to feel that kind of buzz and energy coming back.
Yeah, you just can't beat that face-to-face contact, and as you say, collaboration and you know, just having those opportunities to have those conversations, and it stimulates conversation, doesn't it? Which
absolutely
you just can't get on Zoom.
No, we'll do our best. We'll try for you, but not as good. Not as good.
So what sort of lessons have you learned on the way to your success that you can share with us?
I think it's an ever-evolving lesson. I think the danger in my industry is that in order to set up an agency, you probably need to be a little bit of an expert in events, which of course is a good thing, but acknowledging that we're not experts in everything, and acknowledging that running a business is a very different thing to running an event. And there are definitely things that apply to both, but they are very different. So I've been on a huge personal growth journey as well as a business growth journey. I think surrounding yourself with people who are better than you is an oldie but a goodie. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I think that being flexible and really understanding that it's about what the client needs and the objectives of the event, and not trying as best you can not to put your own commercial optic or personal optic on it is a really valuable, particularly in the industry that I work in as well.
And that leads to a question, I think, which is, you know, you talk about what the client needs. Do you get involved with the client? So, if you take in my world, in the media industry, in Penny's world, if you're going into that space, would you require that the event provider would want to get involved with your strategy from the day one and get involved, or do you just come in at a certain level and say, right, you've got your side, you're going to do events, we'll just showcase it for you now?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. I think it goes back to that flexibility. We the difficulty with events when we're trying to sell into clients is that different organizations have different structures, and different people within organizations have different responsibilities. So in some cases we're working with PAs and EAs. In some cases, we're working with marketing teams. In some cases, we're working with HR teams. In some cases, we're working with sales teams. In some cases, we're working with an external supplier, like a consultant, who's come in and has been tasked to do this as part of a larger project. So it's really about not being precious about, I need to know everything in order to deliver the event. That said, the more we can know, the better we can make our recommendations against the objectives. So we do always ask the question around objectives. We're working with a consultancy firm at the moment who are doing some internal events, and they have asked us to come in and sort of rip up the rule book, and how can we do these events differently? How can we run this agenda in a way that is going to feel very fresh and innovative to the team? And so they've given us complete leeway, which is amazing, to create something amazing for them. That said, we have other clients who are very well versed in internal event teams who say, we've got 200 people, we need to get them together over 2 days. This is the agenda. We just need you to make it look good.
Yeah.
So post-pandemic, you say some businesses have walked away because they're tired, or whatever the reasons are. But what makes a good event business post-pandemic, do you think? And I suppose that leads into why have some of them closed, and you're just going from strength to strength.
So I think, firstly, I don't necessarily think that not good event agencies have closed. I think there have been some casualties that are devastating.
Yeah.
We as an industry rely very much on our clients. So if our clients' portfolio happens to completely include clients who are struggling, whose budgets have been cut, we work with a lot of tech companies, for example, most of whom have been told not to spend this year. Now, if your event agency completely relies on that industry, that's really, really hard. And it's a very fine line, because some clients really like the fact that you are a specialist within, let's say, tech industries or automotive or pharmaceuticals. Other clients like you to have a broader portfolio so that you're taking best practice from one industry across to another. So it is a little bit how you set up that portfolio, I would suggest. I think the second thing is really, again, that flexibility. So we offer a menu of services. So if you work with us, you don't have to have the all singing, all dancing event management product. You can just have us do your venue searching for us, or you can just have us managing some suppliers for you, or we can just help with a team event, or we can just help with transfers. We're trying really hard to slot into those organisations as and when we can. I don't think it's that much different post-pandemic, in the sense of I don't think that a good agency looks different now to a good agency pre-2020. But I do think that the pandemic is going to have a ripple effect for many, many years on how resilient people feel at summoning up the strength and the energy to go again.
Yeah,
I think that's a very real, and I think that's true of children. I think it's true of social situations. I think we're seeing lots and lots of private clients who people are desperate to get together and they have a party and then we have 50% not turn up.
Oh, really?
It's acceptable now just not to turn up because you don't feel like it, which is a very different mentality. And I don't necessarily think that's a permanent thing, but it's you know, self-preservation has become a really much larger part, I think, of how people think about whether they attend events, but also how people think about the businesses that they run.
So the culture post-pandemic of working from home, and there's been a lot of publicity of certain workers refusing to go back and work in the office.
Yeah.
Has that led also then to more companies wanting to get the staff together at events?
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. And I think that on the one hand, you could go, well, that's brilliant for the event industry because they're actually all getting together. But on the other hand, you're asking an event, an opportunity, you know, an occurrence in time to fix a much, much bigger problem of a culture within an organization that it you know, it's only an event at the end of the day. I'm a huge advocate of the power of events, but they aren't magic. They can only do so much. So it's really about developing with the client how we want to best use them and what the platform is that we're going to use and what can we actually do to ensure that the objectives that they come out with are things they then take up and run with. It's no different to how we did it before. It's no different to how we did it pre the last recession or the recession before that. Every recession or big blip in our industry does seem to a point rebalance how we're doing things.
I guess I was at an event this week, funny enough, the night before last. I was in at an event, and it was actually held within a car showroom. It was the Bentley car showroom in Berkeley Square in London, so it was the old car showroom. However, what I didn't realise, one, they had an event space downstairs and in the showroom, which was a good start. Whether they had one or not, they could have made this work there anyway. So it was a smallish event for about 100 odd people, and it was a very cheap event therefore to put on. And the showroom got people to walk around their cars, and maybe someone might buy a car and spend £500,000 on a Bentley. I don't know, but the point on my tail is the fact that it doesn't always have to be a big event, does it? You can, depending on budgets, it can be a small event space which you can utilize stuff that's already there as well as bringing in stuff to start a whole big new show. Absolutely.
And we're getting a lot of clients who are mandated now not to go off-site. So we're going in and delivering events within client offices. You know, the space around you is often the most forgotten space.
Yeah.
That's always been true to a point, particularly in the automotive field. You know, they're very keen on using different spaces in funky warehouses and those sorts of things. But we're definitely needing to get more creative with budget.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily, possibly a little bit controversially, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. When the events industry is booming, we do tend to have a percentage of clients who just want to spend more than they spent last year, do bigger than they did last year, do better than they did last year. And it's no bad thing sometimes to kind of really look at it and say, well, actually, is throwing more money at it or making it bigger, is that making it a better experience, a more relevant experience? Is it giving more sense to why we're holding this event? Does it make it more memorable for people? Not necessarily. Sometimes it's the being clever that actually is cleverer. You'll remember that Bentley event for a long time, whereas if it had been in a hotel ballroom somewhere, you probably wouldn't.
It's quite right. And also I know that what they do, and you're probably the same, is so this is an ad agency basically. They have an arm that does events and after dinner speaking, etc. And that was the point of Wednesday night, to highlight their after dinner speaker arm. But I know that in their case, and I'm sure you can relate to this, that they started off with a retail client who were they were small retailer, and they've grown their business. As a lot of people watching this show will be SME who've got a small business and going, well, I can't really go into this big space. But what they've done quite creatively, as you mentioned earlier, is started off small, and they've now actually got to a point where they do an open golf championship every year. And it's only for the clients. They've got a couple of celebs who come along for them after dinner speaking arms. And it doesn't cost them a lot of money, is the point. But they look like they're, big boys in the space. That's what you do so well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We actually have an arm called Potting Shed Event Academy, which has been set up. It's a digital course arm, and it's been set up to help business owners run and run some successful and profitable events. So even those people that need to charge tickets for their events. Yeah. So organizations that can't afford to outsource to an agency, can't afford to have an event specialist come in. It's a kind of beginner's guide, if you will, the ABCs of the basics that you need to put a good event in place. Because what we do is not rocket science or brain surgery. It's just that we've done it for a long time, so we're really good at it.
Yeah. So you've done large events and you've done small events, and I know you've done a lot of fun events, but could you just give us a flavour of the largest event you've done and the smallest one?
Yeah, so the largest event we've done sort of from a numbers perspective is we did an event probably 5 years ago now, which was a 5,000 person exhibition held at the Intercontinental over in O2, which had content, exhibition, dinner cruises, sponsor dinners, all sorts of things. In terms of complexity, the largest event we've done, we ran an event in January 2020 for a law firm, which was a 7-day event in London. Culminating in a gala dinner at Borough Market, which had never been done before. 1,500 people came to that. It was the 1st of February, so it was a little bit chilly in a venue with no roof and no walls, but it went really, really well. So those are kind of our big ticket ones, I suppose. And then the smallest event, we are running an event next week for 12 people. And it's a board dinner and an away day and some accommodation and some transfers to go to one of their sites to do a site visit.
And I guess anyone listening in who is an SME, they will probably, if they don't have a budget to start with anyway, they will have people and connections, you say, whereby there are creative environments where they could start with a small space, whether it's their own premise or someone they were, associated with in business.
Absolutely. And finding other people that are wanting to support your event, or finding other people who are interested in the audience you're interested in as well, is a really cunning way of doing it. Yeah. We're really happy as well to speak to people and just say, look, it's not really for us. We were approached earlier this year by a new accountancy firm who wanted to do a charity event in September. And after talking to them, I said, look, we can absolutely do it, but this is the price tag it would be for us to do it. But why don't you actually think about doing a golf day? And I can give you a great golf course. And this is a golf day they do. And I think you could just be a part of that this year. Yeah. And that's what they've decided to do. And she came back to me yesterday and said, oh, actually, we need to find a ticket site that, is good for charities, because everything seems to be very expensive. Do you have any recommendations? We're super happy to recommend those sorts of things. So I think it's surrounding yourself with people who can see the value and want your event to survive and thrive, and then working out actually what risk you're willing to take. Because unfortunately, every event you do, much like every piece of marketing you do and every advertising element you do, there is a cost risk and a time risk associated with it. So what are you prepared to put into the pot in order to make it work? And what's it actually worth for you? Yeah. Is there some real return on investment that you're going to see? And how do you measure that? And how do you make sure that you grow that year on year?
Yeah, it's like, I know that, and if you can alleviate some of that risk in terms of cost, as I say, if you've got people you could go to and host an event for you, and then your job is easier, I guess.
Absolutely.
Maybe not as lucrative, but it's easier, and it fits the client. You can help grow the client from there. I know in our case that event I was talking about in New York last week, that event is somewhere in the world every year, and next year happens to be in London. So we are using the opportunity to go to our clients, if that's the right word, who are members of the association, people like the Daily Mail and people like the Daily Mirror and blah blah, who've got offices and spaces, and like the Baby Shard, if you like, in London, where News UK hangouts. They've got spaces where people go, wow, and it's relevant to their business as well. So, and it saves on costs, of course, too.
Absolutely.
So anyway, so let's get on to AI. Does AI come into your business?
So AI I think it's going to be every facet of life, some way, shape, or form. I was talking to a photographer the other day who is using or able to use AI now, obviously with clients' knowledge and permission, to take amazing photographs and then eliminate, background people, or change the color of the sky, or all those sorts of things that really is so quick now with AI. We also know that companies are using AI certainly for pitches. So to get a starting point from a pitch document perspective, it's got some very, very, very interesting applications, I think. However, I think the trick is going to be, back to my point of nothing beats face-to-face interaction. Like, I don't care what AI you had, your event in New York would not have been the same if you weren't all in the same room. No. So it's how do we harness the power of it rather than shy away from it and think it's in some way competitive. I think the agencies that do well are going to be those agencies that are able to see the opportunity and embrace it, rather than those who are going to think, well, it's taking over the world, so I'm just going to keep my head down and hope it goes away and it's just a fad.
Yeah. How do you see it affecting your operation per se? I mean, do you see any efficiencies, or do you see any worries?
We efficiencies mainly for the large parts. I have to be a little bit careful. One of our largest clients is an AI company, and they still run events. They still run face-to-face events. So certainly efficiencies, I can absolutely see that. I think for me, the main challenge with it, I think I suppose the red flag, if you like, the warning for me is that I'm a huge believer in authentic communication. And I know, Penny, this will be something probably for you as well. And my concern is if people start using like ChatGPT and all those sorts of things a lot, that everybody's voice is going to start sounding very similar. Everyone's voice is not going to be their authentic selves, their way of communicating. And I'm a huge believer that people buy people. So how do we replace that human connection if we're effectively putting a little buffer cushion in the middle that might be someone writing, but equally might be something that has been artificially generated in some way, shape, or form?
I think the early signs are that you can see when something is being written by a robot.
Well, you can now, but this is early doors, Mark, and we know that these things evolve and change, and
they're going to get smarter for sure,
and get better, and get smarter, and get better at replicating. And I think to a point we're quite good at recognizing it now as well, because it's not everywhere. Whereas I think if it was everywhere, it might become much harder to disseminate. Actually, that doesn't sound quite right, but is that just because that person potentially isn't a very good communicator, or hasn't communicated that fact in a very good way?
Yeah.
Or is it because it's been written by a robot? It's a very fine, different line, I think.
It is. Well, we'll watch this space,
Yes, absolutely, with interest. But we're using it. So, for example, I have an AI app that I use when I'm on project calls, and it transcribes the meeting, and then it allows me to have a look at it afterwards. And then I can, as long as I say action in the meeting, so that's an action point, I can then search action point, and it'll do me a list of all the action points from the meetings.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, for me, on project meetings, is a game changer.
Yeah.
Because it saves so much time, and it's not 100% accurate, but it's not starting with a blank piece of paper, which I think is often the hardest thing.
Is that Otter AI?
Sorry?
Is that Otter.ai?
It's not Otter, no, it's Firefly. I do use Otter. I use Otter as a kind of voice note.
Because they're becoming smarter as well, I've noticed, over time, aren't they?
They're all getting there, absolutely.
Yeah, just written down Firefly. I'm going to look into.
There you go. You can thank me later.
So, Julia, what would be your advice to any of the SMEs watching this on how do they integrate events into their future strategy?
I think the first thing would be, do you really want events in your strategy? So do you need them? Because not every organization needs them or wants them, and they're not useful to every organization necessarily. I think you need to be a believer in that human connection. And then what does an event mean? Because an event, by dictionary definition, is just a happening. So it could be that the event that you do is just a very simple get together. It could be the event that you do is some sort of anniversary party. It could be the event you do is put on a conference that is, you know, so that your thought leaders in your field. It could be, you know, there's so many different ways of using events. So it's about understanding, where is your strategy at the minute? What is it that you want to do? What are you looking to amplify? And then is there some kind of event activation that would amplify that faster, get you to that endpoint in a faster, more efficient, more effective way? I believe that people buy people. Face-to-face interaction is king. And so if you have the ability to get people in the same room as you, we do it, for example, we have client events that we run, and we get existing clients in a room with potential clients, and they talk to each other, and it's so much easier than me having to go out and sell all the time. So we use events in the similar way. If you have a client base that allows you to do that, if you have an employee base that needs to get together in that way and collaborate in a different way, I would suggest you do need to. But then it's about aligning it very clearly with your internal, external strategy, and making sure that you don't get carried away on the train of, oh, but it's just such a great event. What does that mean? What does that actually mean? Because there needs to be a pound sign, dollar sign, euro sign, whatever sign attributed to that as well.
That's good advice.
So sort of to end all the discussions we've had, what do you think is the future for events? You know, what tech do you think will be brought in, or how do you think it will change in the next few years?
I don't necessarily think there's a huge amount of tech to be brought in. I think we'll just get better at identifying where using tech is appropriate, where actual physical human interaction is appropriate. And I hope at some point that we'll get better at doing a hybrid. I've said this a number of times, but I truly think that a hybrid event is like a sofa bed. It is neither a good sofa nor a good bed. It is an incredibly difficult skill to master. It's not one that we do. We don't offer hybrid events here because it is so hard to get it right for a virtual audience and a live audience simultaneously. And so I hope that there's some movement on that, because not only because of, you know, pandemics and travel and, you know, wanting to ensure that we don't clog up the planet anymore, we have these global organizations who have a real need to communicate with employees, customers, suppliers all over the world. And we can't keep bringing people together in one big space, flying everyone on aeroplanes everywhere. But the solution we have at the minute isn't good enough.
Yeah, you're right.
But if I knew the answer, I would just generate it and make it, and then I'd, you know, be sorted. But I don't know the answer. But that's where I think we need some help.
My association has come to the point that we were just, you know, before the pandemic, it was all events, and we do lots of events around the world every year. And then of course pandemic came along, everything pivoted to virtual, so everything became Zoom. It came a little bit of Zoom fatigue, as you can might imagine. And we're glad obviously we've gone back to, you know, live events, and we found some interesting things out. So, you know, we found that we didn't know whether this was the second event last week we've done one in Copenhagen last October. There's the first one back, the European thing. With that one, we sold out. So there was a pent-up demand from people to come back out and meet people, as you're making the point of earlier. Secondly, we found that whereas one country and one media company may send one person in the past, we were finding 6 people from the same company coming.
Oh, that's interesting.
There's obviously been a budget there, and you know, lots of people want to get back at them. We didn't expect. And what we also found was that since the pandemic, something like between 70 and 80% of the audience were people who'd never been to one of our conferences ever before. So I think this thing about never waste a good recession, a lot of people left the industry, but different people have come in. So they're all experiencing the new world now, if you like. So we're learning as we go as well.
And those events will now become more impactful, but you probably won't go, or certainly not short term, go back to the number of events you were having before, because now you're very much more mindful of the ones you run. We want to make sure they are super impactful. And there are other smaller ones that maybe are very appropriate to hold on Zoom.
Well, I host a webinar on a sort of weekly basis, a live webinar for on specific topics. But then we'll also have running alongside the live events where people can talk face to face. So I think that's the way the model will work in the future. Not doing hybrid, as you say, at the same event, but doing them separate things completely.
Yeah, and then people can consume information in different ways.
Yeah.
And people do like to consume information in different ways.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, Julia, thank you. It's been fascinating.
Oh,
Been brilliant.
my pleasure.
Thank you.
It was lovely to talk to you both.
And if people want to talk to you about your business, how do they do that?
So if they just have a look at pottingshedevents.co.uk, that's where you can find us. Drop us an inquiry form, or you can follow us on, we're mainly active on LinkedIn. So have a look at Potting Shed Events on LinkedIn.
Right.
Super. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Really interesting.
And look forward to seeing you in person soon, Penny.
Yes, definitely. Let's do that. Come and see the alpacas.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember them from before.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye for now, Julia.
Bye.
Bye.
So there we go, Pan.
Fascinating, and I do think you're right. I strongly believe I was at a meeting this morning, a steering group, and that's what we were talking about, doing webinars about certain subjects, webinars that bring certain category of people together, and then face-to-face every quarter, because the face-to-face is still so important. It's the only way
you're involved with a breakfast initiative, aren't you, where people come together from different businesses to meet each other, network and stuff, and you can't do that on a Zoom call, can you? It
doesn't work the same. No, because there's always that. I mean, we've even done it in this interview. It's sort of, oh, shall I, because you can't read people quite as well in terms of continuing the conversation. So no.
So there we go. So another great guest, and we've got lots more coming up for everyone. But in the meantime, if anyone wants to get in touch, Pen?
Yeah, get in touch. We're on Facebook at the UK Brand Show, and Twitter as well. Then there's the website that you can email us through, and you can find us on YouTube to watch more of these wonderful interviews.
Excellent. Well, that's it. Thank you everyone for joining us again as usual. We'll be back very soon with some more great guests. Thank you for now. Bye.
Bye.